Now I want to start with the backend for that. Let's have a look at the server.js file. This is, in the end, our Node Express server. And one important thing about Node and Express is that, unlike with, for example, PHP, when you're building a Node application, you launch the server itself with Node.js. With PHP, you need some extra software like Apache to launch a server, which then runs and interprets your PHP scripts. With Node, you use Node itself to launch that server. So the server.js file has all the logic it needs to run the server, but also then to handle incoming requests. Now, we'll dive a bit deeper into how Node and Express works in a standalone refresher module. So I don't want to lose too much time on that right now. In the end, what you'll just see at the end here is that we have some listen method, which we call, which in the end will start your server and listen on port 5000. So this is also where you could change the port, but not all ports will work. Some are not allowed by your system. And for example, 3000 is not allowed because that's where our React app runs already. So you should leave that at 5000. And in addition, besides some other setup, you will see an app get and an app post method. This registers so-called middleware for certain paths. So here you see that path thing for certain HTTP methods, namely here a get method and a post method. So here you see that method path combination thing I was talking about. And then some functions that should be executed when a request reaches such a method path combination. And then here in the end, I sent back a response with some products. Here I create a new product. I validate the user input before we do anything else. And then I create the product, create a unique ID with some third-party library, add it here to this dummy products thing I will have a look at in a second, and then send back a response upon successfully creating that product. This is our core backend logic. Now, what we're not doing here is talk to a database, because for that we need to set up a separate MongoDB server, which is a bit more work, not horrible, but a bit more work, and therefore we will do that in a separate module. But what we do have here with dummy products is a dummy JavaScript array. This, however, is only stored in memory of this running Node application, which means whenever we restart the server, which we can do by quitting our Node server with Control-C and then rerunning npm start, all that data will be lost. So after restarting that server, if we reload the React app, you see it doesn't find any products anymore, because as I mentioned, this is only stored in memory of the Node app, which of course is not a great storage. It's just a dummy storage here. Later, we'll of course store data in a database. You will also see this strange thing. I will come back to that later. That is important to allow communication between our frontend, which runs on a different server than our backend. But again, I will explain in detail why we need this and what this does later in the course. Well, and that's already it for our backend. You might not understand everything here, but again, we'll have a refresher on Node Express later. But it should be relatively clear that these are our endpoints and that this is where our main logic happens on the backend. Now let's have a look at the frontend. There we have a React application, and React applications are all about components. Components can be functions or JavaScript classes, and in this course I will use only functional components. In my React the Complete Guide course, you'll learn about both though. So there you can learn more about React components and different ways of building them. Now here in the frontend folder, you see that index.js file. This is in the end the entry point for our frontend application. This is where we render our React app, which is imported from the app.js file. So let's maybe have a look at that. Here, this is the JSX code. By the way, if you've never seen this before, this looks like HTML. It's HTML in JavaScript, an invention by React in the end. It's called JSX, and it is transpiled to valid JavaScript by the build setup, which we use behind the scenes here with our npm start process in the frontend. This is simply a special syntax which allows us to write code which is translated to instructions that should insert or remove elements in the DOM in a highly readable way to us developers. So here what I got is I'm rendering a couple of React components header, new product, product list. These are all React components. And also some default HTML elements like main and paragraph based on certain conditions, for example, if we're currently loading or not, and I'm passing some data to my components. Now, these components are all imported here at the top, and you can find them in their separate files. For example, a button component, which wraps the native HTML button and adds some extra styling. The input component, which combines a label and input element and adds extra styling and behavior. The header component, which looks like this, and some product-specific components. For example, our new product form here, our product list, and a single product item. This together is responsible for getting onto the screen what you saw there. And in case that's totally new, besides that React the Complete Guide course I would recommend to you, you will also get that brief refresher I also already mentioned multiple times. Now in app.js, we also got more than just our components which are rendered. We also got some front-end logic. So logic that decides what should be shown on the screen and which also is responsible for sending these background HTTP requests to our, backend, which is our Node.js Express server. Now you see that logic here in the app function, in this app component, and there I use a feature called React hooks. These are special functions provided by the React library, which help us with managing state, which is data that, when it changes, leads to a re-render cycle of the component, so which basically tells React to update the real DOM if the data changes. And we also use the useEffect hook. This is in the end a hook which allows us to run some code when certain pieces of data change. And here specifically, I configured it to run when our application launches, and only then. Now here in this when the application launches code, I in the end reach out to the backend. The fetch API is a native JavaScript API built into browsers. I send a request to this backend URL here. It automatically is a GET request, and this is a combination which is supported there, get to /products. As you can see in the backend code, triggers this function. And then I expect to get back an object which has a products array, which I indeed do send back here on the backend. And I extract that response, then access this products key and set my loaded products, so this loaded products state data, to the data I got from the backend. And as I mentioned, this state data is special. When it changes, React will re-render the UI, which is the reason why when this loading finished, it swaps this loading keyword here for either our products or this fallback text. I also got the add product handler function, a function in a function, which is totally fine in JavaScript. It is supported in JavaScript without any special tricks. And in this add product handler here, I in the end build a product object and then also send this to the backend, but to a different URL /product, and also with a different HTTP method. The default one is get, but here I override the default to set it to post. And post to /product, that is also supported on the backend, and it triggers this function here. Now there I attach my data and send some extra headers to let the backend know that I'm sending JSON data. This is a helper method available in JavaScript to create JSON data. I check if the response is okay. Otherwise, in the end, I will show an alert, for example, if invalid data was entered in the inputs. And if everything is fine and we stored our data in the backend, I update the products I work with on the front end to re-render the UI and reflect that newly added product. This is what happens here. Now again, more detailed refreshers on the ends will be provided later, but I hope that with that this big picture is clear in general. Now, as I mentioned multiple times, we'll build a complete app throughout this course from scratch. You just get this finished app here. Later, we will build it from scratch, no worries. And therefore, then you will learn how these pieces are built and how they work together. But the general structure should already be clear right now with that big picture here.